So yes, welcome everyone to this webinar about Ask Me Anything authentication and authorization. A little bit different from our usual webinars. So someone already thanked me for this webinar. It's really no worries. It's been a pleasure. I think it's a very interesting topic. So it's been very nice to actually work on it. A little bit of introduction, so at least you know who is talking and who I am. My name is Arianna. I am Italian and I'm currently living in Italy. Last week we had an average of 37 degrees with peak up to 43 degrees, which made living in Italy quite unbearable. This week it's way better. I'm a field engineer at Varnish Software, which means I have the chance to work a lot with people, with Varnish Cash users or Varnish Plus customers. So I really get to know what people is interested in and which topic are good for you or which topic are interesting. A couple of words on the company, on Varnish Software. We are the company behind the famous open source web accelerator Varnish Cash. Most likely, if you have decided to join this webinar today, it's because you already know the company and we know what we do. We develop community software, and we really work together with Paul Henning-Kamp, who is the chief architect for the open source Varnish Cash project. We do develop an enhanced version of Varnish Cash, which is called Varnish Plus. We also have solution for anyone interested in hybrid or private CDN, and that's Varnish Extend, and we have a Varnish API engine, which is really an API management tool. And obviously, since we work a lot with Varnish Cash and Varnish Plus, you also have the benefits, the regular benefits you will have with Varnish Plus, and then of course the management API tool as well. So today's topic, a couple of words. I've decided to draft this slide because sometimes it happens that authentication and authorization are really misunderstood. So the idea behind it is very, very easy. And I'm sure most of you go to the airport quite often. So just imagine yourself going to the airport. You first have to go through the security control, and that's where you authenticate yourself. That's where you show your passport, your ID. I'm not sure, I think in Norway the driver license is considered an ID as well. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. But that's where you basically show your ID and you prove that you are indeed who you say you are. And that's the authentication part. And the same happens within IT and client's request. So a client sends a request and it will need to authenticate itself. It will have to prove that he or she is indeed who she or he say is. After you go through the security control, you reach the gates, and that's where you can board the plane, or you can be unauthorized and someone will just let you know that you can't board the plane. So for instance, you're trying to board the wrong plane. Most likely the hostess or the steward will let you know that sorry, that's the wrong plane. It's not on your ticket, so you are unauthorized. Please go away and find another plane. If everything goes fine, you will just be authorized to board the plane and you will have and go and try to find your seat. And the same happens within client's request and HTTP and in the HTTP protocol. So once you get authenticated, it's not necessarily true that you're also authorized. You can be rejected as well, simply because you're not allowed to access the piece of content you are requesting. So now let's just kick this off and let's start talking about authentication and authorization. So some of the questions throughout the webinar will be answered. Those 9 questions will be answered. It won't be as boring as me reading the question and just providing an answer. I will try to make this more interesting and instead come up with a story and explanation around authentication and authorization within Varnish. I'll make sure we we are all on the same page throughout the presentation. And hopefully at the end of the presentation, I will be able to provide some other answer. We'll see how much time left we're going to have at the end of this presentation. Some other questions won't be answered in this webinar, and that's mainly because I can't really talk about authentication and authorization for 3 hours straight, and also because some of them were slightly out of topic. So if you have very specific needs, please reach out to us, and here's the link you should visit. Otherwise, you should probably go and read our blog and subscribe to it. It's updated, I think, at least once a week. And then we have a very, very nice brand new documentation website, which is a work in progress. And basically, every day we push new content. That's shiny, that's brand new. I really like it. You should check it out. There are most of the questions and the answer I'm going to provide today are documented in a new website. Okay, so what do we need to do? Authentication and authorization. So we need an authentication server. We need clients issuing requests, and we need a web server producing content. It's not mandatory, but it's really, really best practice. So I really don't know of anyone running a website without a caching solution in there. But a caching solution will be optimal as well. So obviously today's webinar, it's about authentication and authorization within Varnish. So we're going to consider a caching solution. And I'm actually going to explain why Varnish is so important in this whole scenario. So when it comes to authentication and authorization, there are really no predefined architectural rules. It's really one of those topics where you can't really come up just with follow this step-by-step tutorial and don't worry, everything is just going to be fine. Authentication and authorization really need to be shaped based on your needs. There are 3 different examples on how authentication can be made. Let's start from the one on the left. We have a client. This client issues request. So the client will have to be authenticated. So the flow is the client issue a request, and the request will have to go through the authentication server. The authentication server will reply back with a unique token, ID, a set cookie, anything that is as unique as your passport, for instance. And the client will have to present this ID token for any request that he or she will try to send to the web server. And the web server from there on can either reply back with a 200 and a piece of content, or a 401 unauthorized, because that client can't really access that specific piece of content. So what's wrong with this first architecture? The main issue here is that the web server is not really protected at all. So the client can be a good client and can first go through the authentication server and then use the unique token and present it to the web server. But if it is a malicious client, it can just try to hit the web server and try to pretend he or she is an admin of that web server and try to leak some of your data or just kill your web server. So the next step is to force every request to go through the authentication server before it is capable to reach the web server, meaning that each client will first have to be authenticated and then authorized before it is capable to hit the web server. So what's wrong here? That's really where the performance part kicks in, and the problem here is that the authentication layer obviously has a little bit of latency to the whole process, and we really want to be very responsive. We want to be as fast as possible for the final client, for the final user. So the idea is that we have the latency added by the authentication server, and the web server takes time to generate content for every single request. So here we come onto the third solution. where we have an authentication layer which protects our web application and our cache and make sure that each client will have to be authenticated. Then we have a caching layer which makes sure we are very performant, meaning that whenever a client is authenticated, content will be served from cache if it is present in cache. If it's not present in cache, then we will go to the web server and generate it. Most of the requests will be served by the cache, so it's really going to be secure and it's going to be performant. But those three are just general ideas of how authentication and authorization can work overall. It's not really mandatory to structure your architecture this way. So now why have we decided to talk about authentication and authorization within Varnish? So Varnish is in a very strategic position because it's most likely it is the caching engine you have decided to use. So it sits in between your client and your backend. And Varnish is capable to talk to the authentication server. And it obviously gives you the usual caching solution, but also we have a lot of VCL flexibility in there. And VCL is a powerful tool for when it comes to authentication and authorization, because it basically gives you the freedom to define how you want to authenticate or authorize each client. There is some VCL to be written in there, but at the end of the presentation, I'm actually going to introduce something new, and I'm sure you're going to be happy to hear about that. A couple of words on how does authentication work. So when do we need authentication? It really depends on which kind of business you're running. The most simple use case, or possibly one of the oldest one, it's newspaper website. Usually you have an anonymous user, which is the user, and anonymous users are allowed to read up till 10, 15 articles within a month. So they have a quota they can use throughout the month, and after they've reached that quota, usually there is a nice pop-up in front of your face which suggests you to become a subscriber to that newspaper website and to pay, I don't know, 2-3 euros per month or something like that, and have unlimited access to any articles within the website. So now let's assume we are subscribers, so we actually can read as many articles as we want, or maybe even better, let's assume there is a hierarchy behind subscribers. So we have platinum customers and they can read any articles anytime throughout the year. Then we are gold customers and we can read up to, I don't know, 200 articles within a month. And then we have silver customer and then can read up to 100 articles within a month. Let's assume we are a gold customer, so it's 200 articles in a month. We first want to log in, and we send a post request, and with our username and password. Varnish talks to the authentication server and sends this post request to the authentication server. The authentication server replies back with a random token or a unique ID, and Varnish will have to return this unique ID to the client. Now the client is authenticated, and I will have to present this unique ID for any other requests I want to send. So now we are authenticated, we have a unique ID, and we want to request a specific URL. We want to read a specific article. We send a GET request where we indicate which URL we want to access to, and we also include our random token / unique ID. The object is not in cache, so Varnish will have to go to the backend and fetch that specific article. The backend generates this article for us, and the article is now inserted in cache. So here's where the magic happens. Varnish, through VCL, can actually check if we, as gold customers, are allowed to read that article or not, if we have reached the 200 articles per month quota, or if we're still able to access that piece of content. If we're still able to access that piece of content, then Varnish will send the content back to the user. If not, the user will see a 401 unauthorized and possibly another fancy pop-up which suggests you to upgrade to be a platinum customer and have unlimited access to articles. So that's more or less how authentication and authorization work within Varnish. Obviously, there is a lot of BCL that needs to be written. So keep this in mind, because that's absolutely important. So up till now, some of the question I can provide an answer to is, the first one is it possible to connect a database and validate user? Yes, as you can see, like Varnish can actually talk to any other authentication server, and as long as the protocol used to exchange data is HTTP, Varnish can do everything, really. Do we need a separate authentication server? The answer is no, you don't really need that, but you might want to have that. And this leads me to the third question. Can Varnish be an authentication portal? Let me explain this. As you can see, there are a couple of images here. The one on the left, it's my favorite one. So we have three different layers. We have a Varnish layer doing authentication and authorization, and it will just do that, and possibly it can also create the unique ID or unique token. Then we have another layer, another Varnish layer doing caching, and in the end we have the web server. I personally like this one better than the one on the right, because the authentication layer will actually protect both your cache and your web server. The one on the right, you have authentication and caching happening in the same layer, and there is some room for potential mistake, obviously, since you do implement authentication and caching in the same layer. So yes, Varnish can be an authentication portal. It can be, you might want to have an authentication server, a separate authentication server, but you can also implement that in Varnish. Just to give you a very, very simple example of how authentication works, this VCL snippet, VCL receive, it's the first VCL subroutine which each request has to go through. So whenever a request comes in this scenario, Varnish will check if the user is presenting also a signature header. And using the digest V mode, which is open source, and you can check that out on GitHub, using the digest V mode, we make sure that the request, signature header is equal to the signature verification header. If they're equal, then the user is authenticated. If not, the user won't be authenticated, therefore it will be also unauthorized in this scenario. That's a very simple example. Somewhere on our website, there is the Financial Times use case. They did exactly this. They had Varnish in front of their web application, acting as an authentication portal. It's really just a matter of a few lines of VCL, so it's really doable. You should check this out, definitely. So yes, Varnish can be an authentication portal. So now let's get into the negative questions. So Varnish speaks only HTTP, meaning that you can do whatever you want as long as the used protocol is HTTP, but it really has no native support for other protocols. So as of today, Varnish doesn't integrate with LDAP or with Radius or any non-HTTP protocols. please notice that I did decide to highlight the native word over there, and that's because at the same time Varnish and VCL is super flexible and powerful. So the idea behind it is to write a vmode. A vmode is a Varnish module, and the Varnish module allows you to extend the Varnish features, the set of Varnish features. In this, I've been thinking about this for a while preparing the presentation, and the idea behind non-HTTP protocols is to implement a vmode which acts as a layer between the non-HTTP protocol and the HTTP protocol. I had a look on GitHub, and there is a 5-6 years old vmode for LDAP integration. I didn't have the chance to review the code, but I had the chance to review the API, or how it is exposed in VCL, and it looks like a very good starting point. So if many of you are interested in that, you can probably reach out to us, and we can work something out from there. Obviously, the downside of this is that there is no supported vmode at the moment, and we will have to write that or to think of something else. And when I say think of something else, you will understand this at the end of this presentation. So sorry about the negative answer for those two questions or any other non-HTTP related protocol. So back again to what we can actually achieve as long as we have HTTP. Oh, by the way, the pictures you see here are all mine, and that's because I'm really ready to take other pictures in the south of France and north of Spain. Back again, one of the questions was about JSON Web Tokens authentication. So what's a JSON Web Token? It's really a unique ID divided into 3 different fields. So usually the user will present something like this to identify itself. The first part indicates the used algorithm and the type of ID. In this scenario, it's a JSON Web Token. The second part is in the JSON part. It's actually the JSON text. The third part will indicate which protocol we did use to encrypt this one and how we have encrypted the whole cookie. So in this case, we did use an HMAC SHA-256, and this cookie has been generated combining a base64 encode taken from the header, which is this first part here, concatenated with a dot, concatenated with the payload, which is this JSON field here. And the word secret has been used as key to generate this HMAC result. So now Varnish can definitely understand what's going on here, but it's not going to be straightforward. We can implement this whole authorization within VCL. So that's the VCL you will need to understand for Varnish to understand what's going on with this unique ID. I'm not going to explain any of this VCL because I honestly believe it's a too long solution. It's fine, it works, it does what it has to do, but we came to the point where we really asked to ourselves, do we really need, or do we really want to write all this VCL? And the answer is obviously no. We don't want to do that for a variety of reasons. The first one being it's very error prone. A lot of VCL lines needs to be tested, and we need to make sure it works for every corner case. It's not easy to maintain at all, and I will also say it's really not beautiful to see. So no, we don't want to write all that VCL. Hence, we came up with something new, which I am going to spoil a little bit today. So coming soon, we're going to have the policy engine. I don't really need to explain what It really does. It's basically an engine that reads through a set of policies you want to set and you want to run the request through. So here's an example. Policy engine fully integrates with Varnish Plus. That's why they sit on the same node. We have several endpoints, which are nothing but really backends. So that's how the policy engine works. Client sends a request. This request, it's a GET request on HTTP 1.1, and the request is also a host header. So now the policy engine will have to check if the indicated host actually exists. And among the 3 hosts we do have an example.com. So now it does exist. The policy engine will also run the request through a set of modules. And those modules can be used to do rate limiting, JSON Web Tokens authentication, upstream 2-factor authentication, anything you can think of, more or less. So the Varnish and the policy engine will send the backend request to the example.com, and this endpoint in this specific example will return a rate limit response. Again, think about the newspaper example I provided like 10 minutes ago or something like that. So the endpoint will return with a 200 OK, and it will also add a set of headers such as the name of the endpoint, the rate limit, so it's 200 requests per on a certain period. It will add the port, the protocol, the upstream URL, and some other headers if you want to. So the response will be inserted in cache, and the client will in the end have the final reply if he or she is allowed to see that piece of content. So at this point, it's clear that we can achieve the same using something that is slightly faster to configure than VCL. So the same example as before, the JSON Web Token configuration, now it's stripped down to just a few lines in a configuration file. So that's a module. That's the JSON Web Token module for the policy engine. And let's just have a look at it. We have the name of the endpoint, which is called example, the host of the endpoint, which is example.com, and the path the endpoint is reachable to, which is / wildcard. So basically / anything under the slash. This endpoint will have a module which is called authentication JWT, and consumers in this example are just a couple. One is foo and the other one is bar, and foo will have to present a key or a secret, which is nothing else but a password, which is some secret. Bar will have to present a password, which is another secret. This issuer field here, it's used to indicate which is the module that issues JSON Web Tokens. I'm not going to present it, but if you have a look at our documentation, there are actually 2 JSON Web Tokens modules. One is for the authentication, and the other one is for the token issuer. So it's pretty complete. This order field here, it just indicates where this module should stay within the chain of modules. So 0, it means it's going to be the first module. So the first thing the policy engine will do is this JSON Web Token authentication. So yes, it's perfectly possible to do JSON Web Token authentication. And another example I'd like to provide is the rate limit with the policy engine. Again, that's nothing else but a module. The endpoint, it's called example, and the host is example.com, and the path is / well, anything else under the slash. The module is the rate limit. In this example, again, this is the first module the request will run through. and we have a couple of consumers again. Foo can actually do 5,000 requests per hour, and Var can do 1 request per second. By default, we accept 200 requests per minute and 10 requests per second. So without this module, you should have written, I'm not sure how many lines of VCL, but it will, I think, at least maybe 100, 150 lines of VCL, making everything more complex to maintain, clean, test, and debug, most importantly. So yes, we can handle JSON Web Tokens, and as you have just seen, we can do either using VCL, using simple vmods. But my personal suggestion is, for these things gets complicated very easy. So have a look at what you can do with the policy engine. Documentation is very good, and we have a very good set of modules as well. So you can do rate limiting, you can do OAuth, you can do two-factor authentication. We have, I'll just have a look at the module. Yes, that's a hope you can still see my screen. That's a complete list of available modules as of today. And that's the whole documentation. It's really, really complete. It's not only a configuration example, but it really explains how it works. As general rules for surviving out there are things we can achieve with vmods and plain VCL. Policy engine is not the solution for anyone. It's a solution for whoever is running complex authentication systems. It's a solution which can help you to reduce the number of lines of VCL you will have to write. But if you need a plain authentication server where, for instance, your user provides username and password encrypted or even plain, in that case, I really feel like suggesting just go for a plain vmod. Don't use heavy weapons if you don't have to. A little bit of credits here just before we can finish this webinar. So there are useful links here, and I want to mention that I did take the VCL example from the blog post of Thais. I'm sorry, Thais, if you're listening to this. I still can't pronounce your name properly. Excuse me. The blog post is very good, so you might want to check it out. And the libvmod for the lightweight directory access protocol, it's at this GitHub link. I haven't tested it, but yeah, as I've stated, it seems like a very good starting point. For anything else, you can reach out to me on those channels. You can reach out to the rest of the Varnish Software crew, and if you have now any questions, I will be happy to try to answer to some of those. The plan in the long run is to write a blog post to follow up blog post for this webinar, trying to answer to as many questions as I can. Let's see if there are questions. Okay, so is the policy engine for Varnish Cache and Varnish Plus or Varnish Plus wholly? To be honest, I'm not 100% sure about it. It's really, today was just a slightly technical preview of the policy engine. If you stay in touch and check out our website regularly, I'm sure you will find the answer to this question. As of today, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure it will fully integrate with Varnish Plus, that's for sure. But I don't know. Are the slides available later? The recorded session will be available. I don't think the slides, I can ask to my colleague if we can make the slides available. For me, it's really not a problem. So I will definitely ask this to upload them somewhere and link to those slides. Okay, so I have another question. Can you create access to different backends based on authentication authorization? Where can I find resources on creating auxiliary backends? Okay, yes, so yes, you can decide how to route your request based on authentication authorization. So the idea is that you first will have to authenticate the user. Once you have authenticated the user, you will have to use Varnish Plus to do some sort of load balancing against your backends. So you authenticate your user, and you can possibly run some check on specific header, because I assume you want to discriminate user based on headers possibly, or based on I'm not sure, the request body or anything like that. So once you're able to authenticate your users, you can decide which backend will indeed reply back to the user. So it's possible for when it comes to resources and where to find examples for this. The first thing that pops in my mind is to have a look at the documentation website we have. I don't really have any idea for any pre-made or ready VCL to copy and paste. So maybe if you're interested in this, we should probably discuss this somewhere else, not here, because it's really not to be a 2 minutes reply. It will be nice to know which kind of users you have, which kind of backends you have, and which kind of requirements you have. So last question for today. How compares performance scalability of the policy engine with Varnish Plus? So the policy engine integrates with Varnish Plus. So it's basically something so the idea is that client sends a request goes through Varnish Plus. Varnish Plus will then send a curl request to the policy engine, and the policy engine will run this request through a set of modules, and then it will return yes, this client is authorized, or no, this client is not authorized, or something like that. We'll return a response somehow. So you will always have the Varnish Plus performance. It will stay the same. Obviously, there will be a little bit of latency on the top of it, because Varnish is sending a request to a third party, which is the policy engine. But if you think about it, and I've just discussed this with the rest of the engineering team here, Varnish is very performant, but when you have thousands of lines of VCL, thousands of regular expression rules, thousands of rewrites to do, compiling VCL and loading that, it takes a little bit of time. So you will have a little bit of overhead in Varnish Plus, even if you do implement the same solution within VCL. So it doesn't really make any difference to implement solution in VCL or in the policy engine. The very good part of the policy engine is that configuration is very easy. It's very straightforward, and it doesn't require hundreds of lines of VCL. It just requires you to know more or less how JSON works and have a little bit of logic. Really, nothing else. I've been playing around with this, and I personally think the configuration is really, really easy to do. Okay, So I guess that's it for today. If you guys have any other question, just feel free to reach out to us. I'm really interested in listening to what your question, doubts, or your feedback as well might be. I'll try to make a follow-up blog post in the coming month or something like that. And yeah, hopefully you will join as well for the next webinar. Thank you, guys.